Korean folk tale, Nolbu and Heungbu. In his farewell address from his deathbed, the old father bade his two sons, Nolbu and Heungbu, to share the fruits of his land and to live together in perfect affection under the same parental roof, saying, "My sons, you are both my blood and flesh. Be good to each other, and I will sleep in peace." But Nolbu was a miser and his wife was an unkind woman. She fed her own children till their bellies swelled like that of a tadpole or a globefish, and when Heungbu's children squatted around the boiling pot and cried for food, she would spank their cheeks with a large flat wooden spoon which she used in dipping up the cooked rice after she dropped its full load into a bowl, obliging the hungry urchins to eat the steaming rice grains stuck all over their faces and to turn their red-hot cheeks for another spank. Heungbu's wife, who appeared to be more of a slave than a sister-in-law to Nolbu's wife, stood silent, for she dared not to say a word although her heart would rise in mutiny. One day, Nolbu's wife picked a quarrel with Heungbu's wife, and poured on her all kinds of abusive language. Nolbu arrived on the scene and got very angry with Heungbu. "Fellow, how long will you weigh on me?" cried he to his brother. "Begone, and never come into my sight." Heungbu, who was a very gentle man, hung his head, and without a word, he packed his bundles and came out of the house, taking with him his wife and children. But in this wide world they had nowhere to go. The poor family wandered on aimless feet for a long time, and at last settled in a dugout under a green hill, putting up for the night without eating anything. On the following morning Heungbu started out with a long scythe stuck on his jiggy, A-shaped wooden conveyance carried on the back, and picked up some dried corn stalks and wild bamboo sticks with which he built a hut surrounded by mud walls before the sunset. But the room was so small and the ceiling was so low that his legs slipped out of the hut when he lay down to sleep, and his shoulders bumped into the ceiling, with his head rising above the roof when he stood up outside. "Alas, my husband! What shall we do when the rains pour down, and the snow?" cried Heungbu's wife. "Yes, the holes in the roof? Oh, I'm so sorry, but the moon and the stars will peep in more often to give us joy all night long. Even though we are poor, we are hard-working, honest, and kind. Perhaps heaven will pour down rewards through the roof some day." Heungbu laughed heartily. Winter went, and spring came with flowers and birds, and some swallows built a nest under the eaves of Heungbu's house, twittering and singing as they went in and out. But one day a swallow, having suffered a snake bite in her nest, fell to the ground, and broke her leg very badly. Heungbu took pity on the bird. So he tied its wound with thread and put her back in the nest after he had killed and burned the snake. Now, it so happened that the queen swallow, far, far away over the South Sea, gave an audience to all swallow, who migrated to the north in spring and returned home in fall. As they marched past before her throne, one swallow hopped and danced as it reported the kind treatment it had received from Heungbu. The queen was deeply moved, and the next spring she gave the swallow a white seed to take to Heungbu, who planted it in his kitchen garden. A tiny bud peeped out of the ground and soon it grew into a long vine with white flowers which were ripened into 5 large gourds. Heungbu and his wife plucked these gourds to eat the pulp and sell the shell as dippers or bagaiji. So they began to saw the gourds with a long saw, each holding its ends as they sat face to face, for the skin of the gourd was as hard as the shell of a nut. After many a push and pull at the saw, the first gourd was ripped open, and out of its snowy heart down poured gold and silver plus precious stones, agate, amber, coral, ruby, and emerald, to the great delight of the couple. Who almost fainted with joy when they found a fine house with all kinds of beautiful furniture in the second gourd. endless rolls of silk and brocade from the third, a hail of rice from the fourth, and a dozen servants, male and female, from the fifth. In this fashion Heungbu became a rich man. When Nolbu saw that his brother had become rich and heard the story of the swallow and wonderful seed, his heart burnt with great envy. So he ran home where he stoned a swallow and let it fall with broken legs. Then he tied thread around its bleeding sore and hurried it on its wings to bring back the same goods to him also. The swallow flew toward the south and reported to the queen swallow about the cruel treatment it had suffered at the hands of Nolbu. The queen was very angry with Nolbu, and the next spring she also gave a white seed to the swallow to take to him as a present. So the swallow flew back and dropped the seed in the outstretched hands of Nolbu, who immediately buried it in his garden. After many a sleepless night and impatient waiting, he harvested the same number of gourds. But when he had sawed them open, out jumped ugly monks chanting and yelling, striking wooden bells, and begging alms in a great noise. A swarm of devils wielding clubs over Nolbu's head. Man-eating ogres brandishing swords which almost plunged into Nolbu's belly. Frogs, toads, and snakes hissing, croaking and leaping all about the house. And honey buckets pouring golden streams of night soil upon the head of Nolbu, giving him a sound bath up to his chin. Nolbu swam in the horrible golden waters as he shrieked and yelled for help. But all people only laughed at him while a host of swallows jabbered a teasing chorus at him. After a hard struggle Nolbu narrowly escaped from these horrible things, and cried aloud, "I was greedy for gold, and in my house the deluge of gold. This is a just punishment for a cruel miser like me." Nolbu became a regular beggar, having lost everything in the golden deluge. He stood in the court of the palatial house where Heungbu lived. He was choked with the mixed emotion of shame and remorse, and words failed to come out of his mouth. At last he burst into tears and cried like a child. At this moment Heungbu ran out to meet Nolbu, and when he learned of the great misfortune that had befallen him, he comforted him with a warm reception and true brotherly affection. He filled a large cup with good wine and offered it to Nolbu, saying, "Drink and drown all your sorrow." And afterwards he invited Nolbu and family to come over and live with him under the same roof.